to apologize because I did respond to your first email.
With the question?
Well, yeah, and I did respond to it, and I thought I did, and then I went back and it was someplace that it didn't go. It was one of those.
Good morning. Welcome to the July 19th, 2022 meeting of the City of Lakeland Planning and Zoning Board. The board meets every third Tuesday of the month to review proposals for changing the city's comprehensive plan, its future land use map, zoning changes consistent with the map, and conditional use permits. The board is made up of 7 members appointed by the City Commission and is assisted by the staff of the Community and Economic Development Department and the city's attorney's office. Staff will advance any presentation slides that should have been provided prior to the meeting. The meeting is divided into 2 parts. The first part is the public hearing, where we expect to hear new applicants explain their requests and receive comments from affected parties. The second part of the meeting is termed the general meeting and primarily consists of acting on recommendations from staff about the cases that came up in prior month's meeting. We invite everyone who wishes to participate to be heard. We do ask that you be concise in your comments and that speakers avoid being repetitive. That is, if several people have pointed out traffic concerns, there's no need to hear additional comments regarding traffic again. But we would like to hear anything new that has not been addressed. In order to allow everyone to have the opportunity to speak, there will be a 3-minute time limit set for each speaker, and the clerk has a timer for that purpose. We respectfully ask that you adhere to this rule. We also ask that at this time that you silence all mobile devices. And with that, we thank you for being here, and I'll turn the meeting over to our Secretary, Ronald Roberts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Item 1, major modification of plan unit development zoning to increase the maximum building floor area for an existing self-storage facility from 72,000 square feet to 99,536 square feet, and allow for a 2-story expansion on property located at 5230 North State Road 33. Owner Acorn Lakeland LLC, applicant Shelton Rice, Peterson, and Myers, PA.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Philip Scarce, Principal Planner with Community and Economic Development. This case for this morning is a major modification of an existing self-storage facility that has a PUD zoning. At this time, they're requesting a major modification. Currently, the PUD allows 72,000 square feet of self-storage. They want to increase that to close to 100,000 to allow for a 2-story expansion. The site's located on North Road 33. As you're heading north out of the city towards Lake Deason, and there's the general location here. And this is the site located at that northeast corner of Lake Luther Road and North Road 33. This is the site. This is the aerial, and we'll go around with some pictures. So it's of the site. So this first shot is looking west on North Road 33. This is the existing facility. And just for your reference as we speak building heights, the existing building heights of everything out there is 12 feet. So as you look along this frontage, the buildings, those have a 12-foot building height. This is looking east on North Road 33 at this corner of Lake Luther Road. This is looking north on Lake Luther Road, and the facility is right here, the parking lot. There's a single-family structure across the street where this fence is. And this is looking into the site. You can see building 4. Again, this is a 12-foot building height. And this is their outdoor storage. This is where the proposed two-story structure is proposed. They currently have outdoor storage right there now. So this is looking south on Lake Deason Road, back towards north back on Lake Deason Road, looking south. This is this is a single-family home behind the structure, and you can see the structure, that building 4, that 12-foot building behind their home, and this is just a zoomed-in version. So we're going to just park here at the site plan, and I'll let the applicant, they have a presentation as well. But again, those single-family homes line on Lake Decent Drive right here. This is that building 4, which we talked about, that you can see behind those houses. And again, that's a 12-foot building height, and this is the area, the outdoor storage, where they want to add that 25,000 square foot 2-story structure. With a 25-foot building height. The future land use of the site is a business park, and again, they're proposing a 25-foot structure here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the applicant and let them do their presentation here real quick. There you go. Sure thing.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Shelton Rice. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Peterson & Myers, address 225 East Lemon Street, Lakeland, Florida. Today I'm here on behalf of Acorn Lakeland LLC. I have with me in attendance today Mr. David Fammy and Matt Fammy of Acorn. They own a couple of self-storage facilities throughout the state, a family-owned business. They operate these facilities, and they have owned this site since December of 2017. Thank you, Mr. Scarce, for going through that presentation. I think that gives a good sense of kind of where we are, a little summary of what we're asking for, but I'll add a little bit more detail as we move forward. Just another location map to give you a sense. You have Lake Luther Road running along the western boundary of the site, Lakeland Hills Boulevard or State Road 33 running along the southern boundary. Access is from Lake Luther Road, and then Lake Decent Drive to the north of the site. Property is approximately 5.8 acres, future land use designation of business park. The context district is suburban neighborhood, and the zoning is PUD or PUD 5596. So I want to briefly go over some of the history. I think this helps kind of color how we got to where we are and how we have this self-storage facility that backs up to single-family residential, and some of the thoughts that have gone along throughout time. So in 2007, Ordinance number 07036 established a 7.8 acre PUD. So this also included a 2-acre tract that was further to the east of the subject property that we're talking about here. It contemplated 72,000 square feet of self-storage and 16,000 square feet of office space. There was no outdoor storage that was contemplated at that time. Fast forward to 2012, there was an ordinance number 12061, also applied to the 7.8 acre PUD. It allowed 14,400 square feet of the office area to be utilized as a gymnastic studio. I believe that was also associated with the property further to the east. Once again, no outdoor storage was contemplated at that time. 2016, so ordinance number 16-043, still nothing has been built on the subject property at this point. Modified a portion of the PUD, so this is the 5.7 or 5.8 acres that we're talking about here. Reduced the front setbacks along State Road 33 from 65 feet to 25 feet. The maximum heights were continued for the self-storage buildings, being a maximum height of 15 feet, but outdoor storage was allowed as an additional use with a maximum height of 20 feet. So you could have the outdoor storage, you could have covered outdoor storage with a building height of 20 feet. Also had a modified landscape buffer that was contemplated along the northern boundary. There were architectural controls that were put in place at that time dealing with the facade and the elevations to make it look a little more attractive during that PUD approval. A year later, in December of 2017, is when my clients acquired the property. So there was some history on this before my clients ultimately bought it. 2018, there was a minor modification done. There's changes to the site plan that were made and allowed the equipment vehicle rentals, so you could have U-Hauls, those types of things on site as well. So since that time, my clients have been busy. In 2020, They built 5 of the 6 self-storage buildings. I think the last building, which is internal here, as you can see, and I apologize for the panorama. It's really the best visual that I have to show what exists on the site today. Is the buildings are so new, the aerials don't show it yet on the GIS system or on Google Earth. But looking at the panorama, you can see this building, the structure is kind of laid out so that you have a fortress around the exterior of the property, and then internal to the site, you have one building pad where the self-storage building has been built. And I'll see if I can, there we go. So this building was recently constructed. This is a single-story self-storage facility. Perimeter access, as you can see kind of right there for those structures, and then they also have climate-controlled internal access, more internal to that building. What we're proposing to do is to eliminate this outdoor storage area and to replace it with a 2-story self-storage building that would increase the amount of self-storage allowed on this site significantly, allow another 27,000 plus or minus square feet of self-storage to meet the growing demand that our clients have experienced. So looking at the existing building, this shows the existing building that's in place, the single-story structure, internal, the 12-foot buildings that go around the periphery of the property. This property is fully guarded or fenced or gated around the perimeter, so you can see the buildings kind of serve as that perimeter buffer around the outside, of course, with landscaping in between the existing single-story self-storage building and then the outdoor storage area where the proposed new 2-story building would be located. This just shows the proposed 2-story self-storage. This is the site plan that Mr. Scarce presented a minute ago, showing slight expansion of that building to the east. We believe, and our engineer on this, Chastain Skillman, has looked at making sure that we can still meet all of the fire code requirements as far as distance and turning and things internally, and we can still do that by expanding this footprint a little bit eastward. And of course, the yellow building, including the orange hatched area, would be a 2-story structure. So summarizing the PUD modifications, we have a couple of tweaks that we'd like to make to the ordinance that was previously approved. Increase the maximum building area from 72,000 square feet to 99,536 square feet. Slight expansion of the building footprint as we've shown. Want to increase the maximum building height for building 6 from 15 feet to 26 feet. And so kind of looking at that height increase and recognizing we have the residential to the north, I thought it'd be good to evaluate and look at what are the existing entitlements on some of the neighboring properties and what's allowed in the suburban neighborhood context district. So the suburban neighborhood context district that this property is within allows at the most limiting maximum building height for any of the zoning categories is a maximum building height of 35 feet. So while the PUD previously limited self-storage to 15 feet, we're still well within what would be allowed in the suburban neighborhood context district. Secondarily, the properties that are to the north and to the west, the residential is in the county. It's an unincorporated county. Those areas are designated with future land use of residential suburban. The county does not have zoning, so it's a little unique, but with the residential suburban land use district, they're allowed to build a maximum building height of up to 50 feet in height. So, have very large single-family structures. What we're asking for is just a portion of the maximum height that we would be allowed in the suburban neighborhood context district if it weren't for the PUD limitation. Secondarily, we'd also like to expand the architectural standards for the building. So as part of the PUD approval for 5596 that applies today, there are limitations regarding the facade materials and things that are required to make it more appealing from an aesthetic standpoint along State Road 33 as you look at the site, and then also from Lake Luther Road. Our proposal is recognizing we have the residential to our north. We'd like to also make those requirements that we have along the second story for our northern elevations where we're facing the residential to the north. We also have to have this higher end architectural standards to meet. So just a couple other visuals, and my client actually had somebody in a cherry picker. You can see the shadow if you look carefully here. Go up in a cherry picker and take pictures to kind of give a sense of what it may look like. Now the cherry picker is much higher than where the building height would be, but this is to give a sense of kind of the buffering and natural vegetation that exists behind the site or to the north of the site. This is looking kind of westward at Lake Luther Road. You can see that on the top left corner here. There's some vegetation that was planted as part of the landscaping that was required along this boundary. And then as you come farther to the east along that northern boundary, there's a lot of existing natural vegetation. And that natural vegetation is what's there today and provides a pretty significant visual obstruction for anybody looking from the single-family residence to the property. So this is along the western boundary looking back to the east. So if you're approximately around Lake Luther Road looking eastward, you can see the planted landscape buffering and some of the trees that have been planted. And then of course the 12-foot tall structure or the building that provides additional separation. Looking eastward from kind of the center of the site, really about where the two-story building would be located. Of course, a little lower elevation. This picture is taken back looking to the northeast. You can see pretty significant oak trees located there, a lot of natural vegetation. That's where the natural vegetation was allowed to remain. And then this is a picture looking northward from kind of the eastern extent between the stormwater pond and the self-storage facility. Looking north, you can see a pretty significant vegetative wall that exists already. So from a visual impact to the residential neighbors to the north, we really don't think there's going to be a significant impact on them whatsoever. We've also discussed and will require that this two-story structure on the northern elevation, there won't be any windows. Those will be the backs of units. So you won't have this concern of anybody in the self-storage structure looking into the backyards of the residential neighbors. And so this is another illustration that has been put together by Chastain Skillman showing the line of sight. And so you can see the single-family structure here on the left, the approximate location of the trees, the 45-foot height in trees. So to look over the trees with an unobstructed view. Of course, you wouldn't see the buildings behind it. With the 12-foot tall building closer to the property boundary, the landscaping buffer in between, the line of sight that you'd have would be relatively minimal. You'd likely only be able to see a small portion of the second floor of this building. So and it would be seeing it through the vegetative buffers that exist there today. So we think from a visual perspective, pretty minimal impact, particularly when we provide these additional architectural standards and requirements on that northern facade. Recognizing some of the history and some of the neighbors that have been out here and comments and discussions we have with city staff, we propose to have a community meeting. So we sent out notices to everybody that gets notice for the meeting for this site, notifying them that we were going to have a meeting on site on July 12th. We held that meeting. We also included phone numbers and email information so that if people couldn't attend the meeting, they could reach out to us and tell us if they have concerns, questions, want to provide some additional feedback. So we've done our best to try to solicit feedback and get some cooperation and participation from the neighbors. At that community meeting, I believe there were maybe 9 or 10 folks that lived in the neighborhood that came. I didn't hear any significant objections. There were a couple of questions, but none that led me to believe that anybody had major opposition to this. And I'd like to thank Mr. Scarce, who also attended the meeting, just to get a sense of what the neighbors may have to say. So in conclusion, our request is to replace the outdoor storage area with a 2-story self-storage building. We've shown how that's kind of on the eastern side of the site, adjacent to where we already have a structure. It's a single-story structure internal to the 12-foot fortress around the perimeter, not on the property boundary. We've shown, we think it's pretty minimal from a visual impact to the residential neighbors. Self-storage is a pretty low impact use, and this is something that I know has come before the Planning and Zoning Board quite a bit lately, but they don't generate a lot of trips, and that makes sense from a practical standpoint. I know when we have a self-storage facility, we go get a unit, we put our stuff in it, and then it's not until we go to move that stuff out of there that we visit the site again. So it's not often that you have a lot of people coming back over and over and over again to the self-storage unit with significant frequency, minimal impact on other infrastructure, maybe a bathroom, sinks, those types of things in this building, but really not a big strain on those facilities. We believe this request is consistent with the city's land development code and the comprehensive plan. We're here. We'll be glad to answer any questions. If there's any neighbors in the crowd or that listen to this that have any questions, we're open to hearing their thoughts. We'll be glad to try to accommodate any issues that they raise. So thank you, and we appreciate your time.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. Where would, that two-story structure that you're proposing is enclosed, so where are the U-Hauls and the RVs going to be?
Yes, ma'am. So the U-Hauls would be located throughout the site, internal to the property. So there's a lot of space. Let me show on the, whoa, I'm going the wrong way. So the U-Hauls, you can see some located here on the outdoor storage area. There are a lot of spaces that are available. Thank you, Mr. Scarce. There are a lot of spaces that are available along the buildings internally that could be used, A, for parking spaces, and that's a kink that we may have to work through with staff to determine if additional parking is required, but also for potential U-Haul vehicle parking. Our client is not anticipating the U-Haul use continuing to be as significant as it is now. They're kind of going to decrease that and use that a little bit less. They'd still like the opportunity to have that there. I think it's a convenience for folks that utilize the self-storage facility, but it won't be as significant. And of course, the outdoor storage would completely be removed.
Would it be on that sandy parcel right there?
So this is
That
where
way.
I'm sorry. So this is where the two-story structure would be located. Mm-hmm. And then there's parking adjacent and kind of along these other units, areas where these vehicles could be parked. And it's hard to see it from this perspective, but there's a lot of space. And I believe Mr. Scarce may have some pictures. I don't want to ask him to pull up his presentation here, but there were some pictures internal to the site where there's quite a bit of spacing between some of the doors and areas for them to locate those vehicles.
So you wouldn't locate them on the sandy parcel on the side over there?
No, ma'am. They would all be internal.
Any other questions from the board?
I just have one question, Mr. Chair, and it's related to the buffer along the north side of the site. It looked like in Mr. Scarce's presentation that there was an area where there was a gap where you could see the north side of the building from the adjacent homes. Is that something that would be addressed to be able to fill in that buffer at ground level so that the residents aren't looking at the back of the building from that standpoint? Because it looks like that there may be some gaps in that vegetative buffer.
So and I've walked that a couple of times, and I believe Mr. Scarce has as well, and I have a lot more pictures that, of course, I didn't include in the presentation from what we've seen. The vegetative buffer that exists here, you have oak trees and it's pretty significant shrubbery, but it may not all go above the 12-foot building. That's a pretty high standard as you move kind of vertically up in the space. And so when you look at the options as far as landscaping, additional landscaping that could be required to put new landscaping in where that natural vegetation may exist, you'd likely have to pull some of the existing vegetation out. And so it's my understanding that when they originally adopted this PUD, they left the flexibility so that you could retain some of the natural vegetation, because that would be superior and better than many of the landscaping proposals that were required, and as they did on kind of that western boundary. So I think we've tried to address those types of concerns with the architectural requirements, the lack of windows, those types of things, but it's a very limited viewing window from my perspective when I walked along the back of that the back of the buildings and the back of the lots of these residential is pretty thick vegetation.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Scarce, the public meeting that was held, you have the same opinion on comments from the public?
Yes, yeah, there were just general questions that they were asked, but they were, of the people that were there, they didn't voice any objections, and I never received any phone calls or emails in opposition to the request as well.
Any comments from the public? All right, this will move on to the next agenda.
We'll come back to you next month with our recommendation.
Item 2, minor modification of planned unit development zoning to allow for a 3,570 square foot office service bay addition to an existing motor vehicle dealership on property located at 4141 North Florida Avenue. Owner Fields Motorcars of Florida, Inc., applicant Kathy McBride. And this is for consideration of final decision.
Good morning. For the record, Todd Vargo with Community and Economic Development. This is a minor modification of a PUD for the Fields BMW dealership. It's located at 4141 North Florida Avenue, right by I-4. Here's the aerial and the base map. Sorry, I said it's the Mercedes-Benz dealership, sorry. So here's the dealership as shown from North Florida Avenue. They're asking to add some office and some service bays to take care of the Sprinter vans, which are becoming a more and more majority of their dealership, a larger portion of the dealership. The Sprinter vans are increasingly popular, and the dealership needs to add an office, waiting room, and some service bays along the back of this structure to provide service for maintenance and upkeep of the vans. So here's the existing site plan that was approved with the PUD. And then here's the new site plan, and you can see I've outlined in green where the changes will be. I've got a close-up version of this a couple slides later, but in essence, this area over here will be one service bay and the office waiting room, and then there'll be some other service bays over here. You can see that they have, in order to keep the flow of traffic, they're losing some parking spaces back here. None of this will, again, all files under a minor modification to the PUD. None of this raises to a major mod level. Here's the side of the structure, and this is where the office and the waiting room and one of the Sprinter bays will go, or service bays will go. And this is just, again, a general kind of block to show you the massing of what will be added. And then here's the back of there's some existing bays there on the right. And then this is, again, approximately, what will be added to the back there. Here is a close-up that I promised earlier. Again, there's a office and waiting room, this area here, a service bay. There's an existing service bay, as you saw in the picture just now, and some new service bays they'll add. And again, they'll take some parking out here and provide for some traffic flow around the building. And I think that's all that I have. Invite the applicant up if they want to say a couple words or explain anything that I might have missed.
Morning, I'm Drew Morrison with Chastain Skillman, and I think you've just about covered it all. There's not really too much beyond just the additions there. Beyond the change to that traffic pattern and removing some of the parking spaces, the only modifications are some adjustments to utilities, including, I think we're moving a grease trap, and the stormwater infrastructure pipes and structures are being modified a bit as well, but there's not really much beyond that.
Just for the record, can we get your address?
It's 205 East Orange Avenue, Lakeland, Florida.
Thank you. All right, any questions from the board?
So with approval of this minor mod, we don't have any changes to the conditions. We would just update the site plan with what you see, what I showed in my presentation.
And there's no existing conditions that would be affected by these?
No, sir. No, we scrubbed the conditions and didn't see anything that would need to be changed. Oh, and I should say, like Philip stated with the last case, I haven't received any phone calls about this case at all, so.
Okay. All right, considering this is open for approval today, I'll entertain a motion.
We call for public comment.
If there's any public comment on this one? For the record, none. All right. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Very much.
Item 3, review of minutes of the June meeting.
All right, hopefully everybody's had a chance to read through them. We'll entertain a motion if there's no comments.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed?
Item 4, change in land use from residential low to residential medium on approximately 25.92 acres. A change in land use from neighborhood activity center to residential medium on approximately 3.81 acres. And a major modification of plan unit development zoning for Town Park Estates, Ordinance 4471 as amended, to allow a 4-story multi-family residential development with a maximum of 356 dwelling units on 29.73 acres located south of Town Park Boulevard and west of Yates Road. Owner, English Creek LLC, applicant Sarah Case, Next Level Planning Permitting. And note, staff requests an additional 1-month continuance for the applicant to redesign the project to address concerns pertaining to compatibility, unit mix and density, and complete the required transportation analysis.
Do we need a motion to accept that request?
Yes, and I just clarify that, and the applicant is in agreement with the
Yes, sir.
request.
Yeah, they requested the continuance. They're still working on their analysis and a redesign of the site.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the request for delay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed?
Item 5, major modification of plan unit development zoning to increase the maximum number of multifamily dwelling units allowed from 152 to 288. Increase the maximum allowable building height from 2 stories to 3 stories, and adopt a site plan for new multifamily development project on 26.8 acres, generally located south of Polk Parkway, east of Hardin Boulevard, and west of the Villas 3, 1020 Parkway, frontage road south. Owner, GG3 Investments, LLC. Applicant, Nick Everly, Hill Point, LLC. Note, staff request an additional 1-month continuance while the applicant works to address access issues.
Similar.
For the record, again, Philip Scarce. Yes, hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel on this case. They're working with adjacent landowner to get access on the site. We'll keep you apprised on this one. Hopefully we don't have to continue it again, but they're trying to get those access issues worked out.
All right. Entertain a motion on this one.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Next item.
Item 6, large-scale land use amendment to allow a change in future land use from residential medium to residential low on approximately 19.2 acres, 02 acres, from residential low to residential medium on approximately 24.42 acres, and from residential medium to residential high on approximately 44.67 acres, and a major modification of plan unit development zoning to allow for the redevelopment of the former Wedgewood Golf Course for 1,028 multifamily dwelling units, 204 single-family attached townhouse dwelling units, 16 single-family detached dwelling units, and a 150-bed assisted living facility on approximately 128.5 acres, generally located north of Interstate 4, south of Heather Point Drive, east and west of Carpenter's Way, and north and south of Wedgewood Estates Boulevard, 401 Carpenter's Way. Owner, SJD Development LLC, applicant Jonathan Hall, SJD Development LLC. Note, staff requests a 1-month continuance to provide the applicant with additional time to revise the application in response to the comments received at the May 17th public hearing.
Hey, good morning again. Todd Vargo with Community and Economic Development. Yes, we've been meeting with the applicant. They are working through some changes to their site plan, and we hope to have this back to you in August.
Good. Any motion?
I move that we grant the 1-month continuance that the staff requested on this item.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed.
Item 7, major modification of plan unit development zoning to allow downtown commercial office, commercial and residential uses on property located at 300 West Lime Street. Owner, Lakeland West Lime LLC, applicant, the Luntz Group.
Good morning. For the record, again, Philip Scarce, Principal Planner with Community and Economic Development. This was brought to you last month as a public hearing. Todd presented for me, went through the slides showing you the 17-acre site located on Sykes Boulevard at West Lime Street. Located here. And again, we'll look at the site again here at the known Ledger building here, located at this southeast corner of Lime and Sykes. The site's located within the Regional Activity Center. It's also located within the downtown CRA redevelopment agency, and it has a PUD to allow for the current operations for the Ledger printing, which is sort of an industrial, printing press, and the office uses there. The requested modifications to allow otherwise the C6 uses that are allowed within the downtown area added to the site. So with that said, we go through the staff memo. Staff supports obviously the change because of the existing C6 surrounding zoning categories. But on the site is currently approved with a 3-story building, office space, and 73,000 square foot of light office industrial space, as we talked about. This was constructed in 1998 as a Ledger building. And the C6 zoning, which they are prepared to amend the PUD to allow the C6, allows for a broad range of retail and residential uses within that category that are appropriate for the Central City Business District. As I mentioned, the site has a Regional Activity Center future land use designation. It's also within the Central City Transit Supportive Area, Lakeland Downtown Development Authority, the downtown and the downtown CRA. Again, the existing PUD was approved in 1995 and is also located within an urban center. Within the downtown CRA, the RAC future land use designation allows for residential development up to 175 dwelling units of and office, commercial, and retail development with a maximum floor area of 5. In your staff report on page 4, paragraph 3, that was noted as a 3.0 FAR. That is not, that since this is in the downtown CRA, that is a 5. So that math on that paragraph is going to change. So within that 17-acre site, that would translate to an intensity of 2,994 dwelling units and 3.73 million square foot of office and commercial retail uses on that site, based on that 0.5 FAR. The preliminary plans for the first phase of the future include 900,000 square foot of mixed use and office, commercial retail uses, including the existing office space that's there now, structured parking as well for up to 1,200 vehicles, and 500 multifamily dwelling units. And this is likely, it is likely that the development will remain below those maximum intensities that are listed in that paragraph 3, but we're not going to cap it. So in the PUD conditions, nothing's being capped as far as the maximum you can do is 500 or the maximum square footage. It's going to be all based on the existing conditions and what's allowed by the comp plan and what's allowed by the land development code today. The entire downtown area, including the subject property, is also located within the TOC Activity Center, where multimodal transportation level surface standards have been adopted and that recognize existing transit, bicycle, pedestrian, and street connectivity in the infrastructure. And that's, you're probably familiar with our TOC policies, and that's a policy, and it's consistent with policy TRN 1.4C of the comprehensive plan. Given the wide range of mixed uses allowed and the desired within the C6 categories, we're talking about transportation. There are no transportation entitlements granted through this zoning action, through this PUD. As they come through with their development proposals, they'll be required to submit non-binding concurrency determined applications at that time to address this transportation and concurrency issues, whether it be water, wastewater, things like that. In the staff memo, the staff memo also outlines the many transit-supported activities that this proposed development would enhance, specifically the West Lake Hunter Trail, the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District downtown terminal, and proposed transportation hub, as well as the FDOT-funded Peach Line. That's a connector with 30-minute frequencies within the downtown. Regarding schools, water, wastewater concurrency, all school concurrency determinations will be made by Polk County School District, and water capacity is expected to be available for most of the potential development scenarios within the C6 zoning district. Wastewater pumping and transmission capacity is expected to be limited, with concurrency granted depending on the scale and the phasing and the timing of the development activity. With all that said, the Community Economic Development Department reviewed the request, and we do find it consistent with our comprehensive plan. And it's our opinion the request, as conditioned, is consistent with the comprehensive plan. All roadway levels of service and operations are expected to be acceptable, and is within, as it's within the TSA. The actual construction, however, will be subject to final concurrency determination and other essential services at that time. At this time, I'm going to just go through the conditions that we propose. It again, we are recommending approval. And again, this is the site plan. It was presented. This is that phase line right here. So this would be phase 1, and this would be phase 2. You can see the existing ledger building right here. So this would, phase 1 would include that structured parking and those retail and mixed use uses. So the conditions, it's recommended the request for the PUD described above and attachments A, B, and C be approved. Again, what's changed when the staff report, instead of that maximum 3 FAR, it's a maximum 0.5, maximum residential density of 175 dwelling units per acre. Permitted uses will be all those permitted by right within the C6 zoning district, including the administrative offices for the newspaper facilities, for the newspaper production and distribution, and as a transitional use. Upon the commencement of the redevelopment of the property for the C6 office, commercial, residential uses, the existing use of the property for the newspaper production and distribution shall become legal nonconforming, subject to the termination provisions as listed within our code 13.3 of the Land Development Code. And C, development standards for the existing, and these are fairly consistent with what we've adopted in the downtown. But the building heights, building setbacks, 100 feet from Lime Street, 50 feet, proposed right-of-way from Missouri Avenue. These things are consistent with what we have in our land development code. You can see the setbacks there. Maximum building height was, maximum building height was 75 feet. Conditions related to parking and internal drives, maximum projection into the required setbacks. Development standards are going to be within that C6 urban center context. So we will, like I said, again, we will review their site plans as they come through with this PUD, but as well as the C6 urban center context substandards as well. And the site development plan, in accordance with the new adopted site plan, the C6 uses here, transportation concurrency, non-binding concurrency determination shall be made at the time of conceptual site plan approval. These again, and then you shall analyze the cumulative transportation impacts as the project moves forward. So as development occurs, we won't just be looking at one piece at a time. They'll look at the transportation on a cumulative effect overall. And they also have to be consistent with the transportation demand mitigation measures of the land development code that are spelled out, and the site access conditions and the non-motorized facilities, ADA compliance there. And the site shall be designed to accommodate a minimum 10-foot wide trail between the Westlake Hunter Trail and the Lime Street opposite New York Avenue cycle track. This crossing shall be coordinated with the site's Lime Street vehicular entrance, with appropriate traffic control being approved by the city's Public Works Department. Such control may include signalization in the event the signal warrants are met. A 12-foot pathway shall be constructed to Palmetto Street. And unless available, 11-foot right-of-way shall be dedicated to required southern curb line from Lime Street to accommodate pedestrian promenade consistent with the Main Street topology. Construction of the portions of an acceptable pedestrian promenade may be considered as an acceptable transportation demand mitigation criteria there. So looking at all forms of bike and ped to satisfy their concurrency requirements. Again, bicycle parking is required, and on-site covered transit stops. The rest of the conditions are fairly straightforward. I'll let the applicant come up and if they have any questions or comments, but again, staffs stand for any questions you may have, and we do recommend approval of the site plan and the PUD modification.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Bart Allen. I'm a land use attorney with the Peterson & Myers Law Firm, 225 East Lemon Street, Lakeland, Florida. I'm here this morning on behalf of the property owner and applicant, Lakeland West Lime LLC. With me this morning, I have Mr. Jeff Donaldson as a representative of the ownership group. I also have with us Lens Group, Stacy Witchen and Steve Boynton, who've been working on the proposed development on this site. We went through a full presentation last hearing. I'm happy to get back into that today again, but given where we are and this being a second hearing, I'm going to skip over that and basically just thank Philip and Mr. Scares for his work on this project and all of staff. We are in full agreement with the conditions of approval. They've been proposed to you this morning, as well as the staff report, and want to thank Philip for jumping on the phone kind of unexpectedly last week just to clear up those couple little tweaks. At the end of the day, what we're seeing here is this PUD modification is set to allow the site to redevelop under the C6 zoning standards effectively that surround the property and are on the adjacent properties, and that's the intent here. Even though we're doing it within the PUD, it is really looking at it going into the C6 zoning, again, adjacent to us in the downtown CRA, and this is, as we discussed ad nauseum last time, where you want to see the type of intense development. So with that, we'll stand for any questions that you may have. Again, thank Mr. Scarce and staff for all their work. Believe this project is consistent with your comprehensive plan and consistent with all your land development code regulations, and would request a favorable vote as we move on to the city council. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? I've got a couple just from the conditions. I talked about access requirements. I think one talked about access to Hickory. Is that correct?
Yes, the intent would be is to connect with Missouri opposite Hickory to try to reestablish the grid system.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at Olive, yes, Olive and Hickory.
Yeah.
Would all of these improvements be established with phase one, or as build out continues? What's the order of operation requirements?
As the build out continues, as the project moves forward over time, where there's opportunities exist to meet these conditions, obviously we'll be looking at those things as, you know, as we get specific site plans for each phase of development.
And then on, I think it's 3C, excuse me, it says a 12-foot pathway shall be constructed to Palmetto. From where?
Just internally as the site progresses. I don't know if there's a specific point we have in mind right now.
Not at this point. It's really, as the site develops and consistent with the C6 standards, it will have an integrated bicycle and pedestrian system. And so the intent here is to connect that with Palmetto along the west side of the Lakeland Electric substation, kind of generally where the old New York Avenue right-of-way was, maybe a little west of that, but that will help provide additional connectivity to the Dixieland neighborhood without reintroducing a vehicular connection, which would certainly create concerns from the neighborhood.
That connection right through here.
Any other questions from the board?
Did Mr. Allen, was there any objection or comment on the recommended conditions from staff?
We reviewed those last week, discussed them with staff, had no issues with the conditions of approval, understand what the rationale is behind all of them, including, reestablishing, the grid network and the connection to Palmetto, which I believe was one of the concerns that was raised at the hearing last time, was to make sure that there wasn't a vehicular access on Palmetto. So we're in full support of the conditions of approval as drafted and presented this morning.
I have a quick question that probably has nothing to do with it, but will the ledger printing operations stay in place for the time being, or no?
There is no intent to have any change to the ledger building. Or their operations. Or their operations. Gannett is staying in place.
Yeah, I guess my only question, comment, concern about reestablishing access to the neighborhoods, which I get in the grand scheme of things, is just not making that a primary exit point for printing operation needs and things of that nature. But if we don't feel like that's a major issue, then perhaps it just gets addressed at future site plan updates or whatnot.
And most of those are going to be accommodated through large trucks that will want to get to Sykes Boulevard, and so we're making every attempt to make Sykes Boulevard the truck route.
It is, I believe, currently, yeah.
And so that the intent would be is that will continue.
And that's a right in, right out. You're not intending to add a signal there?
It's, right now, I believe it's a right in, right out, left in, and there's no intent to put a signal in, mainly because of where it is on the curve and the spacing relative to the traffic signal at line.
Commissioner Locke, if it helped, and we can work with staff between now and city council if we wanted to make sure that it was specific. The condition said basically no printing trucks or no ledger type large vehicle trucks were going out onto Missouri. That would be something that I think we could work through some language into the conditions of approval between now and city commission approval, if that's if that would help.
As the wife of a former Ledger employee, trucks have never gone out on Missouri, so they go out on Sykes, not to worry.
All right. If there's no more questions, we will entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we accept it with the conditions as stated.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Next item.
Item 8, small-scale land use amendment on approximately 0.9 acres from business park to residential medium, and a change in zoning from light industrial and single-family residential to planned unit development on approximately 9.1 acres. Concurrent with a city-initiated application to apply the urban neighborhood context subdistrict on approximately 0.6 acres to allow a 3-story multifamily residential development with a maximum of 96 dwelling units on property generally located south of Olive Street, east of Oregon Avenue, and west of Beach Street, 1506 Olive Street. Owner, True Investors Development LLC, applicant Tom Woodrich, TDW Land Planning.
All right. Good morning again. For the record, I'm Philip Scarce, Community Economic Development. This request is a small-scale land use amendment, rezoning, as well as a city-initiated context change to UNHM. I'll unpack it here real quick. And Todd did a great job of going through the slides last week while I was gone. But this is the site here. The majority of the site is zoned RA4, and and that's 8 acres. You have an acre of I-1 zoning that fronts Olive Street. So that's the acre we're doing the future land use amendment and the rezoning to. So that's so this has a BP and I-1 designations. Those are going to be changed to PUD, obviously. So that's what entails the land use amendment, as well as rezoning. So that I-1 area will be brought into the overall PUD, which is 9 acres. The bulk of the property, again, is 8.1 acres as a future land use designation of residential medium. And this portion here will go from BP to RM. The proposed multifamily development consists of 4 3-story single-family buildings. I'll go through the, look at the site plan here. The maximum of a height of 40 feet. As amenities, the site plan is developed to include an on-site clubhouse, pool, and playground. The amenities are located within the northeast portion of the site. They're right up here. Pool and the playground area here. And that's near the Wayman Ditch, which is located here. Runs along the eastern boundary of the site. The applicant has worked with staff to reserve a portion of the site adjacent to the Wayman Ditch for a future trail connection to the West Side Community Park via Wayman Street. And this will also help satisfy the development's open space criteria. Minimum of a 20-foot easement will be required to accommodate future extension of the Westgate Central Trail to Olive Street. And that's going to be through the site as it connects over here to Olive. And that'll be a work in progress as the site develops out. Prior to the public hearing, the applicant and a representative from Blue Sky Communities met with the Westgate Neighborhood Association to present their plan at their regular monthly meeting, and that was on June 6th. And we talked about that at the last meeting. There were very positive comments regarding the proposal and the site plan. However, there were concerns expressed about the safety and security as it relates to the Wayman Ditch, and this was also at the last meeting as well. There's some security concerns about the pool area, and then have off-site kids coming in and trying to get into the pool and trying to get to that ditch area. So those are addressed in conditions. But overall, the plan met very favorable with the Westgate Neighborhood Association. The RM Future Land Use Designation promotes a compact walkable development and infill redevelopment of densities at 5 to 12 units per acre, contingent upon the natural and physical limitations of the development site. The applicant proposes a total of 96 multifamily dwelling units, which is a density of 10.5 dwelling units per acre. There was also a traffic analysis done looking at the transportation impacts. That was done by Jane Caldera. And that traffic analysis indicated that this would generate 462 daily trips, with those estimated at 35 at the AM and 44 in the PM peak hour. And based on the results of the analysis, there were no improvements that were required. Again, when you look at the site plan, the applicant has worked with staff to revise some of the things that we think we felt necessary that are consistent with our land development code, specifically a framing of the site right here at Oregon and Olive to provide urban edge. And so they really worked with us well to revise the site plan. So you have these buildings here, you have the residential buildings here. Again, you have the clubhouse and the pool area on this site with access, primarily access off of Olive, and there is secondary access here to Wayman as well. And then I'm going to go over the conditions. It is recommended that a request for the change from BP to RM and rezoning from I1 to RA4 to a PUD, and the application of UNH context subdistrict as approved, as described in attachments A, B, and C based on your staff memo. So the permitted uses there would be multifamily, 96 dwelling units. The site development plan shall be developed in accordance with the site development plan as that's shown in attachment C. And then minor modifications may be made at the time of approval, contingent upon the Director of Development, Community Development, and then the modification site plan shall be approved contingent upon the vacation of existing right-of-way and easements that are located on the site, and the relocation of any utilities and drainage facilities within those rights-of-way and easements, and then the dedication of new easements as those facilities are moved around on site. So that just covers us as we move forward. Generally, we would normally development, we would have these easements be vacated prior to development, but there's so many moving parts to this that we're just there as their engineer works with staff and public works. As those lines change, they will dedicate the easements as development occurs on the site. Development regulations are in accordance with the MF12, the Urban Neighborhood Context Districts. The off-street parking is in accordance with 4.11 of Table 4.11-1 of the Land Development Code. The entrance feature in accordance with subsection 3.4.5 of the Land Development Code, Table 3.4-1 of the Land Code. Each building shall have an entrance feature located on the primary street frontage of the building that it's oriented. Alternative entrance features, designs other than a porch stoop may be approved by the Director of Community Economic Development at time of site plan approval. Landscaping and buffering in accordance with the Land Development Code. And with those entrance features, I think that the last meeting you saw some of their proposed elevations that Blue Sky proposed, and they were very nice, and I think those would definitely fit in well with the Land Development Code in the neighborhood. As shown on attachment C, the landscape buffer with a minimum width of 7.5 feet shall be constructed along the perimeter boundaries of the project. When adjacent to single-family or two-family uses, the buffer shall consist of a minimum 6-foot-high view blockage fence and wall, and landscaping consisting of 16 shrubs plus 4 beet-type trees within that 100 linear feet. When adjacent to Olive Street or Oregon Avenue, the buffer shall consist of a 6-foot-high decorative metal fence and landscaping consisting of 16 shrubs plus 4 type B trees within that 100 feet. The perimeter of the swimming pool shall be secured in accordance with the Florida Building Code, except that fences or walls shall have a minimum height of 6 feet to prevent access by non-residents. Access to the pool area shall be secured and locked gate, which only tenants of the apartments shall have access. And 3, to discourage children from playing in the Wayman Ditch, a secondary buffer consisting of a 6-foot-high vinyl-coated chain link fence shall be located to the north and west of the proposed Westgate Central Trail. Lighting, except for city-approved streetlights within the rights-of-way, all outdoor lighting fixtures shall be fully shielded, type such that shall be fully shielded, type such lighting emitting, distribution, reflecting, refracting components of the light fixtures shall not extend beyond the opaque housing of the fixture. Transportation conditions, binding concurrency determinations will be made at the time of site plan. Prior to the first certificate of occupancy, first occupancy of issuance, I can't speak. Prior to the first certificate of occupancy, a minimum of 20-foot wide buffer multi-use trail easement shall be dedicated along the eastern side of the development to accommodate a future extension of the Westgate Central Trail. The easement shall be generally routed through the clubhouse area to provide a connection to Olive Street and the site driveway. ADA compliance, the pedestrian routes shall connect with the building amenity and Olive Street and Wayman Street as proposed in attachment C. Bicycle parking, and should the transit service remain on Olive Street, the time of the building permit issuance, ADA compliant transit shelter and deployment pad shall be installed along the site's Olive Street frontage, with final design being approved by the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District. An easement shall be executed with the land TED for any portion of the transit stop that's located outside of the public right-of-way. And with that, I will let the applicant come up and speak, and we can talk about the site plan if you have any questions as we move forward, but we do recommend approval of this site plan as well as the conditions as proposed.
And Mr. Scares, just to clarify too, that we did provide a markup of some additional sidewalk connections,
Yes.
just to mirror the conditions and the verbiage. And so that would be something that would be provided, subject to approval, to the City Commission.
Yeah, that will go along with the next iteration of the site plan when we move forward to the City Commission. But in a sense, you basically have this. There's some key details regarding the transit stop and access from this sidewalk over to this sidewalk, some other key features there.
Good morning, members of the board. Tom Woodridge with CDW Land Planning here, representing the project that you see in front of you, along with my team present in the audience, to ask for your consideration and approval of our 96-unit affordable housing project. we really are thankful for staff's review and suggestions and the condition of approval we agreed to. There's one that we wanted to talk with you about today. We're currently in review of the write-ups that Chuck provided, the red lines, and think we can accommodate those as well. There's one that was a challenge to us to try and configure on the site, and it relates to condition I2. And if I could bring that up, I'll show you where we are.
Yeah.
Thank you. The second sentence of that paragraph is going to be challenging for us to work through. Our willingness from the onset of this project to work with city staff to provide that trail right-of-way, and also to work it through our site configuration and make sure everything functions well. We've been more than willing to help staff from the very beginning since we submitted an application, and have maintained that multi-use trail as part of our overall plan proposal. The challenge is to try and accommodate the language of sentence 2 of this condition to wrap the trail around the clubhouse and then up to Olive Street. There's a bit of a pinch between the existing parking lot and the property line, and it's kind of a stair-stepped portion of the property. So I just wanted you to see the second sentence, and then we can go back. This easement shall generally be routed through the clubhouse area to provide a connection to Olive Street at the site driveway. And Philip, do you mind putting the site plan back, and I'll kind of try to visualize that. And like I said, our position remains the same, to be supportive of this multi-use trail. We're just having challenges trying to determine how we're going to make that work, even as much as to say that it would be a challenge for us to reconfigure this. Thank you, yes. The gray is the multi-use trail, and then as it heads north to bend it to the west, through that area, you can see there's kind of a stair step, and then to bend it through where we're going to be having landscaping, other utilities, and things of that nature between our entrance drive and the property line to the east is something that we're not comfortable accommodating exactly like that, but we'd like to leave it the condition, of course, to state that we'll be coordinating with staff to put the multi-use trail in place, which is here. And then, of course, using the minor modification criteria, which was in another section, I think it was letter C, I believe, of the conditions, talk about the minor modification to try and find a way that's a solution. But the specifics of that bending through there is something that we're just not comfortable. We've tried, and we will accommodate in every way we can and are supportive of it. But we'd ask for the board to strike that second sentence and just let us work through, which the first sentence says provide the trail essentially, and just let us figure out how we can get that done and give us that design flexibility to make it happen. And I think that's really the main point of discussion this morning from us. I'd love to entertain any questions that you have.
And real quick, just to kind of clarify the language, the reason why we had written it is the easement would wrap around is, definitely recognizing that there's no way to get the trail through as a full 12-foot wide multi-use trail. And so the intent would be is that we would end up with something that would be worked out at the time of site plan submittal that would utilize the sidewalks, internal, kind of adjacent to the parking lot, and then working up to Olive Street, just to really serve as an interim connection until we're able to get the full trail extended up to Olive Street in the future. So yeah, I think in terms of what Mr. Woodrich is discussing, that's exactly the intent of the language as it's written, is that we would have an interim connection to connect to the trail from Olive Street, very similar to what we have down at the south end of New Jersey Road in the Three Parks Trail, where you work through the apartments complex to connect two portions of the trail. So yeah, definitely is not our intent to try to thread the needle with a 12-foot wide asphalt path, but work with the connectivity that's already kind of built into the layout to make that happen on an interim basis.
And would that access help because in one of the previous paragraphs it sounded like the Citrus connection or the bus service was going to be relocated?
Yes, and that's definitely a big concern, and I know last week at the Citrus Connections, the Leclerc Mass Transit District Board meeting, that issue did come up with some of the residents in the neighborhood. The way they left it with the Lamted board is that for the next year, this complex will not be operational within the next year, likely because of construction timelines and site plan review and approval. So as they get closer to completion, then the Citrus Connection will go back, reevaluate that routing, and with every intent to try to put service back on Olive. Okay. But if service is not available on Olive, it does help provide good connectivity to the south towards Highland and ultimately Ariana Street.
So I think where we are is, we would just like to have that design flexibility. Our discomfort comes from the providing that connection up through there. We've provided what we can, I think, at this point for the trail connectivity. If we can make it happen through there, we will, but that sentence kind of leads you to say it has to go there. So we'd really prefer to have that sentence taken out for that reason, and we'll do what we can to make it happen. We still have some things at the entrance drive. If you'll notice the design of the entrance drive from the past hearing last month, we listened to the public and said they want the sound of gate and security. Those terms came up quite a bit. So we widened that to accommodate a turnaround. You'll see the two little kind of jelly bean looking bubbles in white in the middle of that. Those are the turnaround areas, and the security kiosk where you punch in your keypad. So that's wide in that area. And so between that and perhaps at engineering level, if it had to shift either way, it's really a pinch to know if we can fit that trail right of way and everything that we've got going on there at the entrance in that narrow sliver of white that you see between the turn arrow exit for the site and the eastern property boundary. So we're just kind of concerned that language would hold us up and we wouldn't be able to meet that condition if that was the desire or intent, that's where the connection has to occur, if that makes sense.
Philip, if we can go back to that condition, I think I may have maybe offer some language that may help us here. Okay, thanks. So perhaps the second sentence could say, the easement shall be generally routed through the clubhouse area via the proposed sidewalk connections, the proposed internal sidewalk connections in front of the clubhouse and along the site driveway to provide a connection between Olive Street and the site driveway.
I'm really confused about this. Are you saying that you're going to route this public trail through the development itself?
It would be using the sidewalks at the north end of the site.
Is this a gated?
Yes, and that's part of the issue as well. Like, this is a public multi-use trail, and we're concerned the way that it's, even if it wasn't into our site, the way the condition, if we had to push things around, it really is disruptive from a design perspective, and we don't have all that design configuration completed yet to know if it's even going to work. Okay. But to your point, if it goes in, it's definitely a...
What is just to the east of the development? Because we don't have the picture on our computer that you've got.
To the east of the gray line, could you put the site plan up again, please, Philip? To the east of the site is a ditch, and then there's...
That's going to be fenced.
Correct, yes. There'll be, what you'll have is you'll have our development, then you'll have the buffer, and then the chain link fence, and then the trail, and then the ditch, the Wayman ditch, and on the other side of that, a fence.
From the trail.
I'm sorry, say again?
You have access to the ditch from the trail.
Correct. So that what the city has asked for is a chain link fence, a vinyl coated, which is typically black, sometimes green, plastic coated chain link fence. Then you'll have your trail, and then you'll have the ditch, and then is our perimeter fence. So there's still some configurations to be worked out in terms of how the city would gain access to maintain their ditch. And we've talked with staff to say that we'll not just put a chain link fence, but a gate that's locked to allow them access to get in for a city vehicle to clean. We still are working that out because we don't know what kind of vehicles are required for that maintenance.
And then to the east of that is single-family dwellings, correct?
There's primarily duplex, some single-family, but there's a lot of duplex to the east.
Okay, but there's residential.
Homes, yes, ma'am.
And then in front of them are sidewalks, correct?
That street Beach does not have sidewalks, I don't believe.
Sidewalks in the neighborhood are very spotty off of the main collectors like Olive and Central.
Because I'm concerned you're running a public trail through the middle of a gated community. What's the purpose of having it gated if you run
something
public
similar
trail?
Is done at the end of New Jersey as you connect to Peterson Park, there's that multifamily development has gates, because I ride my bike to work through this, and so they have a gate, but there's, in the middle of that gate, there's a pedestrian opening that I can ride my bike through, and then ride my bike through the apartment complex and get on the trail that goes through Peterson Park and up to Cleveland Heights. So that's something that.
What do the residents think about that? The neighborhood residents think about that?
They didn't really mention the the trail very much. They were mainly concerned about security and fencing and things of that nature, if I recall.
It's definitely something we can work out as we get into the site plan review to come up with something that's mutually agreeable with the developer and the city.
Yeah, and in a way, we'd almost, to your point, it's almost like we might even rather have our design of fence. We haven't worked it out yet, but we've discussed how it's kind of like the aluminum version of the wrought iron fence looking, so it's attractive with the vertical bars, so it's more like transparent to see through and looks more elegant for the perimeter of the site. So we would have that around the entire perimeter that you see in yellow here on this slide. And then the chain link fence would be on our interior of our decorative fence. And so it's almost like we've thought to myself, should we have actually put the chain link fence on the outside and then the decorative fence to really give us the perimeter, to your point, of what is our real development site. It doesn't really include Wayman because that's where the city needs to maintain. So I think what we were counting on was the condition on level, I think it was C, that talks about minor modification, and we can kind of move some things around in terms of the design aspects of it, but the intent we're comfortable with as far as the public said they wanted security. The city feels like that's important. We honor that as well as far as having security of that ditch, but also being able to maintain it. But in terms of the trail realignment, as with any trail alignment, I know Chuck and Philip will echo this, I'm sure, is like there's always one piece of the puzzle and 14 other pieces of the puzzle to figure out in the future, right? So there's some other land between us and Olive Street to where this multi-use trail has always been shown on our plan, and that will take the coordination of other property owners perhaps, or perhaps we can squeeze it in around there, but we're just not sure it will fit exactly as conditioned in the location that's conditioned. So that's why we're hanging our hat on that condition to say, can we have some accommodation for not having to.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to give you some flexibility with that.
Yeah.
Does it have to be routed through the clubhouse area? Or can it just mention that it has to be routed through the premises?
I'm fine with that.
And that kind of affords the flexibility that they're looking for.
And I'll just mention again, like, we're not sure that we'll be able to, I mean, when I look at the site plan, to reach all the way to Olive Street, I mean, that's the ultimate intention, is to have the multi-use trail reach that. But to the degree that we, as one property owner, can achieve that when our property doesn't really touch Olive Street at that point, that's, also the concern that we have, is that what if we can't make something stretch all the way to Olive Street for whatever design limitation? We're working in that direction. We just don't have all the pieces of the puzzle in our control.
Well, I encourage you to go down to New Jersey Road and visit the area that they cited, because it is utilized by pedestrians and bicyclists, myself included, people who walk their dogs, and it's a really nice connectivity portion of that area, because you don't have to always be on the sidewalk where cars are blasting past you. You can be in a little bit more quiet space. So visit there and see how it could possibly be incorporated.
Yeah,
I'm sure the residents around that area would appreciate it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I'm a long-term resident of Lakeland who's utilized trails all over the city, big proponent, helped to put them in place from a planning perspective throughout my career, definitely supportive of the concept. And we are providing a key segment on this site to make that happen through this neighborhood. But even to our west along Wayman Road, where we're providing a stub out for this multi-use trail, there's several other pieces to the puzzle to connect it. So that's my point. I think our team's point is that we're providing a massive investment in terms of the land area, and a contribution and a cooperation for the city's need to put that trail in place. But we're one piece of a puzzle. And so I think from a design perspective, we've been accommodating to the city staff's request to move buildings around and shift things, and that's really moved a lot of our pieces of the puzzle around. And this last condition really just, it's very tight, and we just would hate to move forward in a total agreement and tell you we're fine with it, and then we can't accommodate it, and then we'd have to come back to a hearing for a major modification because of a condition that's written very explicitly.
Is there any way we could preface that condition with approval at the administrative level rather than having to come back to this forum? I mean, if it's just a modification of an easement?
Absolutely. Yeah, the board routinely delegates to staff certain approvals, so.
It's definitely not the first time things have changed in the engineering phase of a project, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would call that minor, and certainly in the spirit of keeping that connection alive to Olive Street.
So I guess my question would be, would you be opposed to maintaining the language that's in there with the addition of changes to this condition may be approved at the administrative level?
Yes, as long as it's understood, if for some reason we can't accommodate that trail connection, I mean, we hope to, okay? But if for some reason that we can't, that it doesn't kill the project at the administrative level.
And I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but it sounds like even if it's connected with a sidewalk, it doesn't have to be the full 20-foot easement with the 12-foot trail. If it's just a sidewalk that edges around to connect up to
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, the sidewalk would suffice. The intent is just having some type of connection there. So yeah, we definitely recognize that there are some constraints as you get further.
I think that's fine. And I mean, I think that would be almost like a temporary solution, Chuck, wouldn't it? Because the ultimate would be to have the 20-foot trail, full trail. So if we dead end it like it is there to the gray, and then we just put a sidewalk that's kind of that temporary connection until, let's say, 5 years from now, someone says, we're ready to put that final last 100 feet in, great. That's the ultimate goal. But for now, the temporary solution is that connection point. I think we can work through that.
Okay.
Thank you. And that's really all we had, unless you have any questions of us at all about the project.
Any questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion, what you said.
Yeah, I'm like, how do we word this to how do we do
Philip,
that?
can we go back to the condition real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to.
Generally is a pretty key word in that second sentence.
Yes, I was thinking as well.
Easement shall generally be routed through the premises to provide a connection to Olive Street.
So my original recommendation was maintaining the language, just adding changes to this condition may be approved at the administrative level.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so just to restate the motion.
Thank you. What he
Make
said.
a motion that we accept with the conditions, with the caveat that section I, number 2, shall be altered to say the easement shall be generally routed through the clubhouse area to provide connection to Olive Street at the site driveway, to be determined at a later time by administrative,
Review.
yeah, by administrative staff.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Item 9, major modification of plan unit development zoning for Track E of Morgan Creek Preserve to allow for the construction of 5 single-family detached homes on approximately 35.08 acres on property generally located south of Nadella Road, east of Hamilton Road, and north of West Pipkin Road, 4806 Hamilton Road. Owner, English Creek LLC, applicant, William J. Malloy.
Hi, good morning. For the record, Joshua Cheney with Community Economic Development. And we are looking today again at Morgan Creek Preserves Tract E. Just to briefly recap, this was part of the original 2004 PUD approval for Morgan Creek. This is a 35.08 acre parcel. It's located on the north side of the English Creek drainage basin. I would like to note that the bulk of the property has a future land use designation of residential low, and there is a small portion of the site that has a designation of conservation. It's 0.06 acres. And if you would allow me to just briefly show you a few photos of the site. This would be the private portion of Hamilton Road. This is looking south. And this would be from the vantage point of Hamilton Road looking west along Medela Road. This would be looking north towards the publicly maintained portion of Hamilton Road. And this would be looking east towards Medela Road. So as you recall, this is a substantial deviation from what was originally proposed with 49 lots. The residential low future land use designation allows for the development of residential densities up to 5 dwelling units per acre. This is far less than that. As submitted by the applicant, the revised application will be developed at a density of 0.14 dwelling units per acre. Again, this is well below what's allowed for this future land use designation via the city's comprehensive plan. To accommodate this level of density, the minimum lot size will be 4.83 acres. That's approximately 210,395 square foot. This is significantly larger, obviously, than the 5 to 10,000 square foot lots that you see throughout the existing developed phases within Morgan Creek. One of the issues that's been raised in the past has been, particularly by the residents, have been concerns over floodplain, flooding issues, the amount of impervious surface, and I think what you'll see with this current proposed design is it's addressing those concerns. This is far less impervious surface. There will be, one of the concerns also that was raised was septic tanks. We're talking about 5 here as opposed to nearly 50. Along that same line, one of the questions that was raised by the board, and you did give us instructions to do some additional research and to contact county staff. We did do that. I spoke with the planning administrator. We've had communication with them as well as other staff. One of the questions that was raised was if this site, and that being the subject property here before you today, Tract E, were to be developed, or excuse me, if the property to the north, the property that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners as a suburban plan developed, were to be developed on septic rather than sewer, if that would be an issue. So we did communicate that concern to staff, and the Land Development Planning Administrator did verify that that is not an issue, and in fact that is common, if not probably the predominant form of sewer development, or no, I'm sorry, within suburban plans development, within the unincorporated area, they are predominantly developed with septic tanks. It's not an issue with the lot size either in the suburban plan development or within the Tract E here within the city. The other concern was the minimum lot size. Again, that's not an issue on either. So again, the concerns were raised by the board last month. Do the changes to this tract as presented to the Board of County Commissioners make a difference? We raised that issue with county staff. They do not. Does the fact that this will connect to or utilize central water and then septic, that is not an issue either. This development could be developed on its own without any development here in Tract D, that being the suburban plan development. There won't be any, there's no projected issues or concerns, I should say, with regards to the roadway levels of service. And overall, staff has determined that the proposal before you today is consistent with the city's land development regulations as well as the city's comprehensive plan. And we do recommend approval with the following conditions. Tract D will be identified as 5 dwelling units. The lots in Tract D shall have a minimum lot area of 210,395 square feet. In accordance with RA1 suburban neighborhood subdistrict standards, the development standards will be as follows. The minimum front setback required would be 30 feet. The interior side setback would be 15 feet. The minimum rear setback would be 40 feet. And the maximum lot coverage would be 10%. The site development plan would be developed consistent with what you see before you today. And the Tract D will also provide 3.51 acres of open space. We have modified under utilities the condition to read that it is anticipated that the project will require improvements to offsite water and sanitary sewer lines and/or lift stations to meet concurrency. However, it is also anticipated that Tract D will not be required to connect to the city's sanitary sewer system due to the lot count and proximity to existing city sewer service. In addition to that, in response to the Southwest Florida Water Management District's water supply plan and at the discretion of the Water Utilities Department, with the exception of Tract D, phases of the Morgan Creek Preserve development that have not undergone subdivision plat review as of August 1st, 2006 shall install an independent reclaimed reuse irrigation water distribution system to serve all the lots and common areas within those phases. Under I, vehicle access, the project shall be limited to 2 vehicle access points on West Pipkin as illustrated in attachment C, and then we have 1 access point on Medela Road serving Tract F, and another access point on Medela Road serving Tract D. As it relates to pedestrian circulation system, we've added language regarding a roadway and 10-foot wide asphalt side path shall be constructed to the south side of Tract D to accommodate a future connection to Tracts B and C. The connection's feasibility and final alignment through the remainder of the PUD to West Pipkin Road shall be subject to future engineering analysis and City of Lakeland approval. As it relates to road improvements, prior to the first building permit in Tract D, a new roadway shall be completed to Medela Road that is constructed to Polk County standards. The intersection at Medela Road shall be constructed in compliance with the Polk County Land Development Code or otherwise permitted by Polk County. The street within Tract D shall be constructed to City of Lakeland local street standards and shall be conveyed to the city only if requested by the City Public Works Department. A stub out should be constructed to the south side of Tract D to accommodate a future connection to Tracts B and C. No creek crossing to Tracts B and C shall be open to vehicular traffic until Hamilton Road, north of Medela Road, is improved to acceptable collector road standard and is aligned with the local street serving Tract D at the Medela Road intersection. Under Section S, Stormwater Management, the stormwater management system for Tract D shall be designed to retain the difference in pre- and post-development runoff volumes from a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. The rate of discharge from the post-development site shall not exceed the rate of runoff from the pre-development condition for a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. Under buffering, and it's important to note, because I think this is very relevant as it relates to some of the concerns that neighbors have had in previous presentations or public hearings. For Tract D, a natural vegetative buffer with a minimum width of 30 feet and 6-foot high PVC fence shall be established adjacent to the north of the project's boundaries. Similarly, a natural vegetative buffer with a minimum width of 20 feet and a 6-foot high PVC fence shall also be established in west perimeter of the project's boundaries. When located on individual lots, the natural buffer shall be retained through the recording of an easement agreement and maintained by the homeowners association. Lastly, special tree preservation provisions applicable to Tract D. The developer of Tract D shall only remove those trees listed as qualified in the Land Development Code necessary for construction of the infrastructure, roadway, curb and gutter, stormwater pond, and piping The builders shall retain as many qualified trees as is feasible to allow lot development and to maintain rear lot buffers between adjoining properties and along the floodplain areas. So again, just to recap, nothing has changed as it relates to the site development plan before you today and the proposed modifications to this PUD that we've had several public hearings to discuss. As you directed, we did discuss it with county staff. We've addressed the concerns as it relates to septic tanks, both in the suburban plan development directly to the north, as well as what's being proposed within this development. It doesn't change anything that they will be utilizing septic tanks. That was recognized both in our staff report as well as the county staff report. There aren't any issues with density, and again, as it relates to the city's comprehensive plan and the city's land development regulations, this request before you today is consistent with both. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
I'll just, if I could add to that as well, I did contact the attorneys that were working on the litigation, that there was some litigation challenging the county's approval. It was dismissed. We pulled the notice of voluntary dismissal that was filed in that suit, and that was a stipulated dismissal, which means that both parties agreed to dismiss and agreed to assume the costs of their own attorneys, which is probably why the case was dismissed, was to avoid the risk of potentially having to pay the other side's attorney fees if they lost. But I did speak with the attorneys involved, and they all confirmed that litigation is concluded and that the county's decision is final and is not subject to legal challenge at this point. So that means that county approval is a vested right of the property owner at this point in time.
I just want to say I appreciate all of the work that the staff has done coordinating with the county. I think that was important to us. And I think there was a misunderstanding with regards to the septic tanks in the portion that was the county's property originally, which is in the county. The question was if we did not have water, it was going to have wells, and it was the size of the lots with the wells and septic tanks. Now, my understanding is, according to this, there is going to be City of Lakeland water for both?
That's correct.
That's correct.
For the county portion and as well as the city portion?
That's correct.
Okay. Like I said, previously, I don't want to reiterate this, but we had to look at the whole project. I mean, for example, like it says in here that Tract E will have green space and they will have a community area. Well, that's not actually on here. It's not a big deal, I don't care, but when you're if we're looking at just those 5 parcels, they've got their own green space and 5 acres. They don't need somebody to give them more green space. And the same thing with, do you understand what I'm saying? When we look at the whole parcel, I understand that. It's the same thing with the HOA. Is the HOA going to be just for those 5 parcels? Or is that going to also include the county? Because I think it makes a big difference. Things that you would do in a subdivision with 29 houses on one street are different than what you do in a subdivision with 5-acre parcels. So I think that those are the kind of things that really need to be looked at. I still have an issue with water, and I'm going to say this is sort of a rhetorical thing, but I want everybody to think about this that's ever lived in Lakeland. The county has approved multiple places. 2 that come to mind right off my top of my head are Lake Deason and Hidden Lake. They approved those things. How they did it, I have no idea. Built houses at Hidden Lake down there around that little pond that was there. Same thing with Lake Deason. We had 1 year of good rain, and those things were flooded, and some of them down at Hidden Lake were flooded to the roof. And when it was all said and done, where was the developer? He was nowhere to be found. Was county commission responsible? No. The homeowners were, and their insurance companies. And hopefully they had flood insurance. But what I'm saying is, this area, and we all know it, has an issue with water. And the fact that we are putting houses, any kind of houses, in that area, whether it be the 29 for the county or the 5 in the city. I think that really needs to be a consideration. Are we building houses? I don't care that the FEMA says, oh, this isn't a floodplain. You know as well as I do, there's lots of places around that aren't in a floodplain that flood. And I have concerns with this. What happens when and if this does flood? Like, we're sort of thinking might be the case. Who's culpable for this? Is it going to be the city? Is it going to be the developer? Because the developer is going to be gone. And I have these concerns. The other concerns that I have, I listened to the city council meeting yesterday, and there was a portion of Rolliston Road that the city has taken over to maintain that was in the county, as I understand. The county has done this in the past. All you have to do is look at Evergreen Acres out in Polk City. And that was a county road out there, which the county said, we don't want to be bothered. This was years ago. We don't want to be bothered with it. Turned it back over to the homeowners. And they gave 12 foot, 15 feet, whatever it was, on each side of this road going into this subdivision to those homeowners. And the homeowners were thrilled because they could fix it themselves and they didn't have to wait for the county to do it. Until they got ready to sell their properties. And then what happened is, you had no egress to your house. If you were distal to 33, you weren't the first house off of 33. You were driving over your neighbor's property to get to your house. And you had to, now if you sold your house and who's ever buying it is getting funding, you have to get a letter from all of your neighbors, all the way out to 33, that says it's okay, that's your egress. I think that these are things that we need to really think about. Is the city prepared? If the county backs off on this and says, we're not going to take care of this road, screw it, we aren't going to be bothered with it. Is the city prepared to take that road over so those 5 people have egress to their properties?
Well, and I have another point. If I'm reading between the lines here, y'all went to the county and said these 29 home sites, they're approved for sewer, but who's going to bring the sewer in? City of Lakeland's not going to. Can they go on septic? County says, sure, why not? You've got that creek right there, English Creek, and you're potentially dumping hazardous waste into that with all of these septic systems. You're setting yourself up for an environmental disaster.
I guess to that point, this has no bearing on that, right? So they can go out there and build all those houses with septic today. What we decide today would not affect
What we
that
decide today is it the right thing to do?
for the 5 parcels.
Because the other parcels, C, B, those were already approved. Those are getting done, so. I voted against that one, on the record.
And there's, been a lot of urging from the neighborhood to try to get the city to force the county to revisit its decision. I haven't really been able to find any authority or any examples of cities taking actions like that. I haven't found any case law that could support a decision like that. And if we just kind of back up to the fundamentals of what this process is, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and that means that this board is charged with applying the city's code to the application that comes in front of this board. And so if the concern is with, related to this environmental concern or a density or whatever it may be with the county's portion, this board would need to articulate a city code that would be applicable, that would be triggered by that concern, and then somehow link that concern to a city code section in order to have a lawful base, make that a lawful basis for denial. And so, it's like I said, I haven't found any good examples, or else I would would be able to kind of lay out some options and roadmaps, but that it's not something I've been able to find. And being that it is a vested right, like I said, it was challenged. That challenge was dropped, withdrawn, and at this point, if the city, if we had an issue with what the county approved, we could have challenged that approval as well. And that's all expired at this point. That's all passed. So that decision is vested. They have a right to develop according to the approval that they've obtained from the county. And if the city were to somehow call that into question, then I think it would, we would be affecting a vested right, which would trigger other laws like perhaps Burt-Harris, and other things that if any other vested right, even if the city, its own approval, if we had approved something in the past and then wanted to revisit that vested right, that would open us up, and that's an even more clear situation where we would have jurisdiction and authority to do something like that. But it would open us up even in that situation. So going beyond our territorial jurisdiction definitely opens up a lot of questions legally.
I think it's important to note too that the 29 lots within the unincorporated area, again, that can move forward without this subdivision, this project.
Okay.
The septic tank issue would be reviewed by the state through the Department of Health, Polk County Department of Health. They have their own development criteria and standards that would have to be met. These meet the minimum lot size. They have their own setbacks. So that's a separate review that's handled by essentially the state. However, again, it's important to note that the 29 lots, that's a separate project from this in the unincorporated area. They can apply for construction plans today. They can apply for plating shortly thereafter, and that project would be reviewed and approved separately based on what was approved by the Board of County Commissioners in the past. I think it's also important to note there were some concerns raised, I think, by the board as well as some of the residents about the site development plans that were showed as exhibits within the county staff report. There have been no substantial changes. In fact, I don't know that there's any changes between what was approved as a binding site plan for the suburban plan development. Now, there was an additional exhibit for context purposes, and it states that on the county staff report, showing both the project in the unincorporated area as well as the project within the city limits. Now, obviously, we all know the history here of what occurred on Track D. There have been substantial changes as it relates to the request to modify that. But again, that has no bearing, on the segment or the subject property within the unincorporated area. The portion in the city cannot move forward without access through that project because they need access to the public roadway network. But that being said, again, I just want to reiterate that there's nothing preventing them from applying for construction plan review with Polk County Land Development.
And we're not the final word for this anyway, because if we turn it down, it's going to go to the city council.
There is that opportunity.
Well, if this board denied it, then they could avail themselves of our city appeal process, which would put them in front of the city commission. But it is a limited review. The commission would have to make the determination that this board didn't follow the law or didn't provide due process or committed some kind of error before the city commission would hear the full application.
And did the city, because the other tracks B and C and A were all approved over a year ago, correct? So those probably went to the city and those were approved as well. So the economic impact really isn't these 5 lots, it's all those other ones that were previously approved. If you're really talking about economic or not economic, ecological impact, that would have been more of an impact than 5 lots.
It's not so much the 5 lots, it's where they're located in reference to the wetlands.
I agree with you, but tracks B and C also located right there, and you're looking at 400 houses. So that at that point would have been that, but those were approved.
So under the current PUD, there's all the separate tracks. Those have already been approved and they're entitled. What's in front of the board right now is a modification to that overall PUD addressing specifically tract E, which in the current PUD, it's just a placeholder. There's, I think it says something to the effect of the density will be determined at a later time. So if the project is denied, then that would remain in place. There wouldn't be any improvement allowed in tract E, but all of the other previously approved parts of the PUD would remain intact.
And within tract E, within the portion that we're talking about within the city of Lakeland, the 5 lots we're talking about is well below the RL maximum densities. And then in terms of the technical requirements of, when you start looking at the engineering level of drainage, you start looking at utilities, those are all addressed through our formal subdivision review process as laid out in the Land Development Code, and is subject to a separate process that would move forward as the infrastructure is developed and the sites are developed. And so there are technical reviews that would address these concerns already established through our process, through the city's Land Development Code.
It's also important to note that both projects would also be reviewed by the Southwest Florida Water Management District. So whereas there's going to be an engineering review with the City of Lakeland Subdivision Review Team, as well as Polk County's Land Development Review Team, they will also have to apply for permits with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and they will be looking at everything in total as well. So I just want to make that point that these aren't engineered plans. However, if they are successful in this being approved, then they will eventually apply for that level of review with both the city and the county, in addition to the state.
I have a question under section H here. It says that it's also anticipated that tract E will not be required to connect to the city's sanitary system due to the lot count and proximity of the existing city's sewer service. If the properties directly south of it and other parts of Morgan Creek are connected to the sewer system, could we not strike that or require them to connect within a certain period of time once the lines are there and become available?
I think the issue is ultimately the constructability of anything through that creek area.
Yeah.
That's the big issue.
I'll just make a comment on the environmental stuff as well, because I know a lot of that does come up in this board, in front of this board a lot. And, a lot of times you'll hear from staff or the applicant that there are additional environmental reviews that happen later in the process. That's, meant to, alleviate some of the concern that the board might have on those questions, that there are additional reviews. But it doesn't necessarily mean that environmental considerations are not relevant for the board. In fact, for the PUD, it's expressly one of the considerations for the board to consider, environmental compatibility. But being that this is a quasi-judicial hearing, if the board is going to make some kind of determination on environmental compatibility, there needs to be some expert evidence there, because that is an area where a court is going to require somebody who's got a qualification to testify or present evidence to the board regarding environmental impact. And we walk a fine line in this process in how much we require of the applicant to invest up front before they know what they're going to be allowed to do. And so if the city doesn't want to go around requiring every zoning applicant to hire an environmental consultant and do, all these studies that are going to ultimately need to be done anyway to be approved by these other authorities. So I wanted to, clarify for you that it is very relevant consideration, but it's also something that the board is limited in only considering what evidence was presented to the board related to that subject. And so if the concern is environmental issues, then I think we would need to get a little bit more evidence on question in order for there to be a solid basis to deny as a result of the environmental questions.
I'm going to propose that the request for the zoning as described in attachments A, B, C, C1A, C1B, C1C, C1D, C2, and D be approved.
I'll second that. Any discussion on the motion?
Just, can I get clarification? And the references you were making were to the proposed conditions as staff and the...
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. You know I never do this right. Yes, according to staff recommendations.
All right.
You might have to
Is he
take a
able to
line.
second as the chair?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I can't second as chair.
Oh.
Sorry.
I second.
All right. All
You might have to take a,
do, okay.
Well, you can call the all in favor if some people do not vote in favor, then you will have to roll call vote, so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, you'll need to do a roll call then.
Okay, roll call.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Nay.
All right, motion passes 3-2. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
And with that, Mr. Chair Pro Tem, I believe now would be, according to the agenda, the time to formalize on our election of officers. And I will say that I spoke to Mr. Phillipson over the phone, who indicated to me that he was regretfully not here today, but that he was open to whatever the pleasure of the board was as far as either maintaining his seat as chair or moving to vice chair or just moving to a regular board member. He's happy to serve in whatever capacity that the board would like. And I believe Ms. Barola spoke to Leanne Lunds, and she indicated the same, I believe. Is that correct?
She stated she's willing to stay as chair. Vice chair, I'm sorry.
Vice chair. Okay,
Vice chair.
so she did not indicate an open willingness to move to the chair position, but was happy to remain vice chair if that's
She did state that if no one else wanted chair, she would. I mentioned that we had a few that were interested, and she said that she was willing to just stay as vice chair.
Okay, so it sounds like our two current officers are open to whatever the pleasure of the board, and so with that, I think it would be appropriate to hear some nominations.
Well, I nominate, what are we starting with, the chairman?
Sounds good.
Okay, yep. I'll nominate the chairman to continue in his position.
I second.
And that, well, the current chairman would be Mr. Lyle Phillipson, so is that the nomination?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I nominate Leanne Lunds to continue as vice chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Very good. Item 11?
Item 11, overview of administrative adjustments approved from January to June.
All right, well, in the essence of time, I will just kind of highlight what's in the packet. We had three, one on Eastern Drive, Ashland Drive, and Carabel River Drive. So they're included in there if you, should you want additional information in the packet?
Any questions from the board? All right, we're good.
All right.
Item 12, report of city commission action on planning and zoning board recommendations, along with planning and transportation managers report.
Okay, I'll be again brief on this one as well. Yesterday's city commission meeting, the conditional use for the church expansion on Papel Drive was approved. The first reading of the conditional use ordinance for the Citrus Mutual site was deferred until yesterday, and so that will be coming back for a final decision on the first, as well as the first readings for the Swindell Road property land use change and Southwest Lakeland Park. So we're starting to line projects up for August 1st. In terms of what's coming in, the scheduled for new hearings next month, we've got a amendment to the conditional use up at, or not conditional use, but we'll be looking for a conditional use change up at the hospital property at the northwest corner of Catherine Road and I-4. Essentially what they're looking to do is expand their ultimate development program. Right now, they were proposing 150,000 square feet. Now they're looking at something in the range of 300,000 square feet with updating a list of acceptable uses, including a freestanding emergency room, as well as an updated site plan. So that's going to be a pretty substantial change to what will become a major campus.
Who is that? Who's doing that?
Lakeland Regional Health.
They're building an ancillary hospital, huh?
Where was it? I didn't hear that part.
At the northwest corner of Catherine Road and I-4. So the site that's under construction right now, this is kind of the next evolution of that development program. So
you recall 3 years ago, the governor, they signed legislation, they repealed the certificate of need process for hospitals. And since at that time, it's opened up a sort of gold rush for new hospitals. Orlando Health, of course, you approved a year and a half ago or so, south of the Parkway there. But a lot of them are probably betting on that and then trying to be more strategic in their future planning compete, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have no objection to it. It's like, wow. And then we've got the other one on 540A that they're talking about. And then the one down on Lakeland. Geez, a lot of sick people around here, isn't there?
A lot of growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Is that all you've got?
That's all I have.
Anything from the audience?
There's someone out there. There's a couple people out there.
All right. With that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you very much.
Is that going to be specialized? Like,
Well, we
like they